Hey everybody! So over the past couple of years I've made many videos talking about electric motorcycles. That is, from reviewing the physical bikes. I was lent bikes to use as my daily bikes, had them for at least 2 weeks at a time normally, tried the charging systems, tried using an electric as my daily, as I say. I used things from 50cc equivalents, cheap 125cc equivalents, expensive 125cc equivalents, all the way up to hyper bikes, like £35,000 ridiculous electric bikes. I am very pro electric bike for a couple of reasons. The first one is the riding experience. If you ignore the fact there is no sound, the low down weight, the power, the speed, everything about them is absolutely great and I love riding them. I do understand why some people don't get the same experience from that without the sound, it's fair enough. I do ride a 440cc DRZ 400 SM supermoto that I've done tons of work to. I am a mechanical sort of guy and I do love petrol and I love the sound of a good bike, but I can't deny that I enjoy riding electrics. The other side of it is the science side, which is that we are coming up to some looming issues. Whether you agree with it or not, the science says that it is the case. And electrics could help solve that problem long term. Now, of course, there is a huge amount of science in this, and I have covered all sorts of things from hydrogen versus electric to synthetic fuels versus electric. And I've spent a long time researching this subject, science. I'm a bit of a nerd, right? So I do understand why most people haven't got the time to sit and watch copious amounts of scientific videos and having an understanding of the whole thing of chemistry and stuff to know, and the numbers side of it, and everything, and the engineering side and the manufacturer side, to get an idea as to why things are good or bad ideas. They can only generally go on what's said, and the problem with the world that we live in now is you'll get people who will say stuff that is entirely untrue, and people will just believe it because they see it on social media. Like, many of you believe that there are kids in lithium mines. There aren't. They're in cobalt mines. It's very true, and we're going to talk about that. And because the science is generally saying that this is a good idea, and that's why we're heading in that direction, everything seems to kind of line up and say that I'm pro-electric, and I kind of am. However, I want to give balance to this because I'm only interested in this from the realistic perspective, not from, dreams, and we do have looming problems when it comes to lithium batteries, which I'm going to talk about. But the first thing, because this is going to get talked about a lot over the coming years, you may want to know a little bit more about lithium batteries so you can understand why they use lithium, what it is, how it works in the batteries, and why there are going to be problems in the future and why batteries can be better and can be worse. There's a lot to it. So let's just get straight into it with the how does a lithium ion battery work? What is lithium? Why are we using it in batteries? Now, I'm going to have to simplify this, so this isn't a 2-hour long video, because trust me, it could be much longer than that. I can't mention everything. I'm trying to keep it simple. So lithium ion batteries, originally invented in the 70s, popularised in the 90s by Sony to be put into Walkmans and things like that. They have proved to revolutionise the portable electric device market because of their power density compared to the old nickel cadmium NIMH batteries and things like that, and disposable batteries as well. I will say here, disposable lithium batteries is abhorrent to me. We should never be making disposable lithium batteries, or really disposable devices with lithium in them, because the lithium is too precious and we need it and we're not recycling it currently. But we have to, for it all to work in the future. I need to get into all of it, but let's start the basics. So lithium ion batteries are found in everything from phones, 18650 batteries like this, by the way. 18650s are called that because they are 18 millimeters across, 65 millimeters long, and the O at the end represents the fact that it's a cylindrical shape. GoPro battery, Insta360 battery, big old Chongus fake Sony battery that gets used in lights and cameras and things. These are all lithium ion, using the same technology, working in the same way. So, what is lithium and why do we want to use it? Lithium comes from the left-hand side of the periodic table in the alkaline metals, which includes things like potassium, cesium, lithium, rubidium, stuff like that. Now, the reason you want to use these metals is because they have an extra electron and they want to give it away. And lithium happens to be the lightest form of this alkaline metal, which means it's fantastic for batteries because you're not lugging around the weight of the battery itself and using that. If it's a much heavier thing, it's going to be less efficient. So first things first, as I say, lithium has an extra electron on the second shell that it wants to get rid of because it's in a more stable form when it's in this form where it has just two, okay? So that's one of the reasons why it's used in batteries, because it has that electron that it wants to give away, and that is very important in how a battery works, like lithium ion. So this is going to be a very basic explanation of how one of these lithium-ion batteries works and how this one particularly is constructed. It is different depending on the size. As you've seen, they come in many different sizes and shapes, but they generally work in the same way. So at the most basic level, we have a cathode, the positive, made out of cobalt. You then have a layer of an electrolyte. You then have a permeable separator, more electrolyte because it can get between the two, and then you have a carbon graphite anode on the other side. Now this is actually a foil stacked together, you know, and then that gets wrapped around a core into a battery, and that's basically what this looks like. So that's your 18650 battery would look like on the inside. There we go, that makes it more obvious that the electrolyte allows things to cross through. So as I say, this is a single stack. You can actually repeat this stack a bit like a lasagna and make bigger batteries and have, you know, have multiple layers wound up together. As long as they're all separated electrically by that separator, then everything is okay. This is where the volatility of lithium-ion batteries comes from, because were it for that separator to break down and there be a direct connection between the positive and the negative, you basically get a super flow between the two, which heats everything up inside the battery to the point that it's going to basically explode. I have a video screwing a screw through one of these batteries, and you can see just how impressively explosive these can be. You may not even realise it's my video, you may have already seen it. So, how do these batteries work? Where is the lithium? And why do they break down over time? Okay, so for that we need to explain where the lithium is first. Now, graphite, if you're aware or unaware, its structure is basically... Okay, I was going to try and draw it, but yeah, I'm actually just going to show you a picture because it's going to make it a lot easier for me. So the structure of graphite is basically a very strong lattice of hexagons. Think of a honeycomb with a node in each corner. And then they are flat, in flat sheets. And then you stack another one of those flat sheets on top of the next flat sheet. Now, you may know about graphene, which is the thinnest material, and you know, it could be very interesting what its capabilities could be in the future. Graphene is basically a single layer of graphite separated apart. Now, the forces holding it together in this way is very strong. In that, imagine it like a stack of paper. If you try and pull a piece of paper on its ends like that, it's very strong. It's not going anywhere, obviously, because it's the strength of the paper. But the force holding the sheets together is only suction from there being no air between, so it will stick, but it will also come apart quite easily. They've been trying to make graphene for years, and then someone stuck a piece of sellotape onto a piece of graphite, peeled it off, and was like, oh, graphene. So basically, the lithium is between the layers of graphite, and I believe that's called intercalation. I can't remember, it's not important, but just know that the lithium is actually between the layers. In fact, there isn't much lithium in lithium-ion batteries. In fact, for per kilowatt of capacity, roughly, there's only about 106 grams of lithium. So if you think about a massive chongus battery, there isn't all that much lithium in them. Okay, so remember how I was saying about how lithium has an extra electron that it wants to get rid of and return to its other state? This is how that happens, and this is how these batteries work. Right, I don't want this to be too long or complicated, so I'm going to simplify again. Okay, so we have the carbon graphite anode. When you connect this side and this side together through a device, you have a flow of the electrons. So what happens is that electron from the lithium that wants to escape jumps from this side across into the other side. And in doing so, over time, the lithium itself also leaches across. So, as you're discharging a lithium-ion battery, electrons and ions of lithium are going from this side to this side. And as it depletes, it all builds up over here. When you recharge a battery, that is, you apply a current to it in the opposite direction, it forces all of that back over to the other side, so it stores it there and then it can come back again. So it's a constant process of the electrons and the lithium jumping backwards and forwards depending on if it's charging or discharging. And this is why you have charge cycles and why batteries like this have a lifespan, because you have a couple of things that happen that are going to just always deplete over time. Okay, so what is it that kills batteries? In their normal use, you have a thing called solid electric interphase. I think it's called SEL. Basically, this is a conversion of some of the materials, the chemicals in the battery, which as it goes backwards and forwards, they'll convert and it uses up some of the lithium, so it will stick basically on here. So you don't have as much lithium going backwards and forwards to carry across those electrons, and obviously as each lithium molecule gives off one electron, the more lithium you have, the more electricity you have. So over time that all builds up, and then the battery stops being as efficient because it hasn't got so much free lithium to use. A lot of it's been converted over here. Another thing that damages batteries, you may have heard with lithium ions, is if you let them always go down to zero every time you use them, you get a conversion happen on the other side where you have too much lithium building up over here, and it oxidizes, basically, from my understanding. You end up with something called cobalt-2 oxide. So that reduces the amount of available lithium and available cobalt, which are the two materials that you need to go backwards and forwards through the electrolyte. Obviously, if you run out of electrolyte, that also stops it if it leaks. But that is what kills batteries over time. The better we can get at stopping them from sticking, and the better we can get at managing the charge, so you're not pushing the batteries too hard, reduces the amount of this happening. So the battery will last longer. For instance, Zero Motorcycles claims that their batteries at 200,000 miles of use will have 80% of their battery capacity from original remaining. Now, if you keep in mind that most petrol bikes don't reach 100,000 miles, that's pretty impressive, and it goes against the argument that people have, which is, oh, they're useless and the batteries have to be changed every 5 years. It actually is more like every 10 years, but obviously it depends on how you use it, and it also depends on the technology they're using. If you have a very expensive battery with some really highly developed tech in it, you can get a lot more out of it than a cheapo lithium-ion cell like an 18650. Now, just to add on a little bit more, one of the ways you can improve these batteries is you put another layer in, basically, between the anode and the cathode, which is called a collector. Now, this can be an aluminium sheet, copper sheet, and it basically helps collect those electrons together and get them back into the graphite, which is holding on to the lithium and the electrons that are transferring backwards and forwards. Now I want to talk about the metals that are inside these batteries, and obviously we're going to get on to talking about cobalt because that is a bit of a problem. We have two types we use. Generally we're using NMCs because they are better, basically more efficient, more power from them, stuff like that. So they're called NMCs because they're made of nickel, manganese and cobalt, and then you have LFPs, which are lithium iron phosphate. F meaning ferrous, you know. So you've got iron and lithium phosphate in them. There is no cobalt in these. So these are your cobalt-free batteries. Great. Unfortunately, they don't perform nearly as well as these, so we're going to keep going with these, and unfortunately that means they have cobalt in them, and that's what I'm going to get to. So yes, people talk an awful lot about mining when it comes to lithium. They don't seem to talk about it when it comes to steel or any of the other rare earth materials in all the other devices that they're using, or petrol itself, or any of these things. It's almost as if they're like, but that's the only place this is happening. Child labour is happening in lithium mines. It's not. I would also like to highlight here that the UK actually only outlawed child labour in 1933. And 150 years ago, we had kids working in mills. So yes, we have progressed, but don't think that we're some angel country. Because we got successful, we don't need our children to work. Unfortunately, in other countries that happens. I'm not saying it's right. It's definitely not. The situation that these kids are in is not good. They literally have to dig through mud by hand to find rocks which contain cobalt. And to my understanding, the biggest problem with that is that that China have got a monopoly over the control of the mines, and so that is a problem. So don't see lithium as the evil, see cobalt as lithium, which is in lithium-ion batteries and is very important to it, but there is an option to replace that maybe at some point, but it's not that simple. Same as there actually is options to replace lithium with sodium. But unfortunately the battery has to have liquid sodium in it, i.e., oh god, top of my brain, 500-600 degrees? So where is all the lithium in the world coming from? Well, 50% of it is actually mined in Australia. They basically do hard rock mining, and this is one of the two ways that you get lithium. Hard rock mining of spodumene. It's basically a lithium aluminium rock mix stuff, and you basically break it down and you get the lithium out of that. There is actually lithium all over the world. The sea is full of lithium, but unfortunately it's very inefficient to get it out of the water. And that's one of the good things about lithium, and why the other form of production is done in arid regions, in deserts and places like that, where the concentrations of saline water underground are very high in lithium. You may have seen pictures of these. They're like fields of square marked out areas with a different coloured liquid in it, very brightly coloured. You basically take the highly concentrated saline water from under the ground, and you leave it in those for 18 to 24 months and allow it to evaporate off and add more on and evaporate off and add more on, and what you then get is lithium carbonate. which can then be processed into lithium hydroxide, if I remember rightly, which is what you want. It's the same thing they get out of the hard rock mining. The main countries that produce, as I say, is Australia, Chile, China and Argentina. As I say, Australia is using the mining method, and I think the other three generally use the saline recouping method, but they may also do some mining. But the point is, that is how it's gathered. Now, when it comes to EVs, people will come up with all sorts of different reasons as to why they're not a good idea. We haven't got the infrastructure, we haven't got the power supply, we haven't got the power stations, we don't... Okay, all of these things can be worked on, and the major issue we have for lithium can be worked on. And as I say, if people can work this out, it is a gold mine. Some people are going to become billionaires in the next few years when they come up with the technologies. Now, the reason, obviously, we're going down this line is because of climate change. Now, whether you believe in climate change or not, that's another argument. I don't want to get into it. We're going to work on the assumption that it is. The reason why we are doing away with fossil fuels is not because we're running out of oil, because a lot of people have got this old impression. I remember when I was a kid, they always talked about running out of oil. That's why we need to get rid of it, because we're going to run out of it. And they're not saying that anymore. They're like, oh no, we're not going to run out, but we need to stop using it because of its impact. Now, I admit, I don't know why they didn't just say about the environmental impact back then rather than, oh, well, it's running out, so we need another option. I can understand how people become a bit conspiracy theorist about stuff, but when you learn the science of things, you can read through that crap, basically. The big issue with lithium, which is going to kick in around 2035, 2030, 2040, around the same time that they want to bring out all these EVs, and it's because they want to bring out all these EVs in that time, that our current projections of supply are going up very quickly. In fact, we are doubling our supply every 8 years, roughly, something like that. However, the demand is becoming really high. Now, the supply is exponentially growing, but the demand is going to exponentially grow, more vertical, above what we require. And that causes, obviously, a deficit, which is a huge, huge problem. It's going to bring everything to a standstill if we don't have the lithium for the batteries. That is going on current projections with current estimates of, people investing in gathering lithium to sell. There are also a few other issues like recycling. It's very difficult to recycle lithium, not because of the material itself, but with the fact there is so little of it in each battery. If you were to want to recycle this to get the lithium out of it, well, you're going to have to actually physically split it. You're then going to have to dispose of the steel shell. You then have to clean out the electrolyte and dispose of that well. You then have to take the graphite out of there, process it to get the lithium back out of it. And that's how some of the recycling methods are going to be. They physically run the assembly line in reverse, and it deconstructs the batteries, and they take all the individual components out and try and get as much lithium back that way as they can. There is another method where you basically just chew this up in a big machine and you chemically take the lithium back out. The exact same way that gold is extracted using aqua regia. The problem is, if we want to go as high EV percentage as what the governments and the mandates and things wish us to do, we are going to need to massively increase lithium production, and part of that mathematically seems that we are going to also need to be able to recycle lithium to get it back, because it's a big important thing that we're throwing away right now when we need more and more of it. Overall, in the entire world, there is enough lithium to make about 7 times as many cars as we need. So there isn't a shortage of lithium itself, it's the speed that we can get it out. So if we can increase that speed with new technologies, or, for instance, someone works out a way of getting lithium out of seawater, well, if someone works out an efficient way of getting lithium out of seawater, they will become a trillionaire in a couple of years, if they can scale it. It is that big of a deal. This is the new gold rush is getting lithium out of the ground in more and more efficient ways of recycling it more and more efficiently. And as the demand goes up, unfortunately, and when demand goes up and supply goes down, the price tends to go up, which is the exact opposite of what we want. And it is where my argument that I made many years ago about CD players kind of falls apart, because I said about how when I was a kid, a CD player was 1,500 quid. 10, 15 years later, they were, you could get a portable one for like £25, £30, and then a few years after that you couldn't give it away if you wanted to because it was a dead format. And that shows how the price came down with the demand, but that's because they could make CD players. You know, it was just more oil, more materials. It was just nothing particularly rare about it. It was easy to do. The economy of scale is harder to prove with lithiums when you're looking into the future the way we are now. And for that reason, I do think in ways it is dubious that we will have that. We will replace every car on the road or every bike with an electric equivalent. There will, of course, be different types of fuels. As I've said, synthetic fuels have a place. Hydrogen has a place, and that will offset those people wanting lithium. And also, they think there's going to be more ride shares in the future as improved public transport. I know people are saying this is leading into that thing where, you know, you have no choice to move around the country because you don't want personalised transport, because if the people have personalised transport, then they've got more power to be, and they're easier to control if we control the buses that they can, the only ones they can go on. If you want to go into all the conspiracy theories and all of that, I understand it, you know, I'm looking at the world right now and going, 1984 is looking rather real. Why the hell are people doing this? Why are they doing that? That's kind of scary. Currently, politics is more of a popularity contest than based in fact and reality. The press and the media have managed to divide people into basically two groups, and the reason they're doing this is the same reason why people make videos to cause arguments on YouTube. If you can try and separate an issue into 4-stroke, 2-stroke, those two sides are so opposed and adamant that they're going to just argue and argue and argue. And it's great for the newspapers to make money, because the more clicks they get, the more money they make. And yes, the news has been clickbaiting for years. Worse, way worse than YouTubers do. I mean, at least it's not malice, because very often they're trying to put across an idea to the people to influence them in a way that's coercive and untrue. Why they're doing this, well, then that's another conspiracy theory as to who they're controlled by, but the point is I want to stick to the science. And we do have a problem coming with lithium ion. It is a brilliant technology that if we could clean up the cobalt side, if we could give it a few more years to really develop, it can be great. And hopefully we will do that in the next few years. We really are moving forward at a seriously fast speed. But we have a lot of catching up to do, and more people want independence of a vehicle. Now, this is why I'm a massive proponent of electric motorcycles, because most cars get driven with one person in them, sometimes two. Wherever you're out driving, have a look, see if people are carpooling. They tend to be a single driver in a massive box with a huge battery. As we're talking about lithium, let's just put things into perspective here. A 100 kilowatt hour EV car battery, which is about 20% above average, because average is about 80, uses the equivalent of 2,000 laptops worth of lithium, or 10,000 phones. So as much as I do agree with the argument, which is when people say, oh, lithium in EVs is evil, like the lithium in all the devices that they own isn't. I made the joke of it being, it's fair trade lithium in a phone, but it's blood lithium in an EV. It's actually the cobalt, but, you know, it could actually be conceived as very wasteful if everyone gets an electric car, because it's going to have so much resources in it, capable of carrying so many more people than it ever will. It's kind of the equivalent of, I want a watch to be splash resistant, but I'm going to buy one that goes to 10,000 metres. You could get one that goes to 10 or 5, that would be fine, but no, you want the one that goes to 10,000. You know, they want a car with the ability to do the worst case scenario range they may ever do in their entire life, not what they do 99% of the time. And I can understand that, and that's why there is a limiting factor to electric bikes and their charging rates. This will be increased. Charging rates can be increased, and we will get to a point when we are charging bikes, I mean, already 30 minutes to 80% on something with a more than 100-mile range is enough for most people. As I say, I try to be as fair as possible, keep to both sides. I have opinions, of course, and I explain why I have those opinions, but I also want to stick to the science and explain where things aren't so good. Do I think we can solve this lithium crisis? Yes and no. If people were less wasteful and got motorcycles, electric motorcycles, rather than electric cars, if more people use bikes than cars, we would be better off. Because you have one person still, but it's using a lot less materials to make that bike and a lot less lithium for the battery, and they're more efficient because they're lighter. I think we can extrapolate from this one simple thing, which is that electric bikes should actually become cheaper faster than electric cars, because obviously the cars are going to need more lithium, and that's a really expensive side of it. Whereas in a bike, you know, it's lighter, it doesn't have such a big battery. They're more suitable for electrics anyway, because you don't need as much power demand. I can go on for hours about this, I need to stop. I've always been pro-motorcycle. I am pro-electric motorcycle if you want to go down that route. If not, you can of course keep using your fossil fuel bike for as long as you like, and you could use a synthetic fuel in that, which would be better than fossil fuels, but it wouldn't be as good as electric, and for that reason it will be highly taxed, and because it's about 4 times less efficient, they're probably going to tax you about 4 times as much, which means your litre of fuel might cost £5-6 by that point. In which case you probably don't want to use it, and this will be part of the argument of, well, that's just the government pricing us out of the market because of conspiracy X, Y, or Z. I don't want to get into misanthropy. I know that humans are going to have to evolve mentally very quickly for us to survive the next 100 years. People need to understand that beyond themselves we have to do more, and that's difficult because at the end of the day people are like, I'm only here once, I'm doing what I want. And I can totally understand that. But do you have that moral thought of the future? I mean, I'm not having kids, for instance, and yet I think of future generations. Yet people who have kids don't seem to think about their future generations and what it's going to be like for them and their kids and their kids. Even though everyone goes on about family like it's so important and, oh, you've got to do all the... But no one ever thinks about the future of them, like, from that perspective. Okay, I really am going to end it now. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you want to support it, please consider doing that through Patreon. As I say, I try and bring truth and reality to things. Catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.